Narrator. Bars are supposed to be places of laughter, music, and escape. A place where you can leave your worries at the door, drown the stress of the week in a glass, and maybe, if you're lucky, make a memory or two. Think about it. Dim lights glowing in neon, strangers pressed together, music buzzing in your chest, conversations blurring into one another as the night wears on. But here's the thing most of us forget. Bars are also one of the easiest places to let your guard down. You're surrounded by strangers. Alcohol lowers defenses. And in the corner of the room, behind a crooked smile, or even in the reflection of a mirror, danger can be waiting. And that's where tonight's stories begin. Before we dive in, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a night at a bar that didn't feel quite right? A weird stare that lingered too long? A drink you weren't sure you should have accepted? Or maybe a shadow in the corner you swore was watching you? If you've ever felt that chill creep down your spine when you're supposed to be having fun, then you already know you're not as safe as you think. And hey, if you're new here, welcome. This channel is where I bring you the darkest corners of true horror. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss the stories I have waiting for you. Now let's get back to the bar. Picture it. A bartender working a late shift, pouring drinks, cleaning glasses, surrounded by mirrors behind the counter. It's routine, until one night, those mirrors reveal something they shouldn't. Something that doesn't match reality. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Then there's a group of friends walking home after last call. The night is full of laughter, buzzing with energy, but behind them, someone else is walking too. Someone who doesn't laugh, doesn't talk, just follows. Step by step, block after block, until the game of drinking turns into a game of survival. And finally, one of the most chilling tales. A man sitting alone, lost in thought, when a friendly stranger buys him a drink. Seems harmless, right? A bit of kindness at the bar. But when he accepts an invitation he shouldn't have, he learns some parties are designed not for fun but for traps. These aren't ghost stories. These aren't urban legends. These are true accounts of nights that started with music and drinks, and ended in fear, danger, and unforgettable horror. So, grab your headphones, dim the lights, and whatever you do, don't look too long into the reflection behind you. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters don't hide under the bed. They sit on the next bar stool, watching, waiting, smiling just a little too wide. Are you ready? Then let's dive in. But before we begin, make sure you're subscribed because the stories you're about to hear, they'll make you think twice the next time you raise a glass. Narrator. Our first story takes us to a small dive bar, the kind of place most people wouldn't notice unless they were already looking for it. You know the type. Faded neon sign buzzing above the door, a couple of broken stools out front, and a regular crowd that never really changes. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't glamorous, but it was familiar. And for one bartender, it was more than just a job, it was a second home. His name was Daniel. Daniel had been working late shifts for years. He liked the quiet that came after the first rush died down, when the bar emptied out to just a few night owls clinging to their drinks. He liked polishing the glasses, listening to the hum of the jukebox in the corner, and watching the shadows stretch across the cracked wooden floors. But there was one thing about this bar that Daniel never got used to. The mirrors. Behind the counter ran a long wall of mirrors, the kind you'll find in most bars, meant to make the place look bigger, to reflect the bottles lined up like trophies, and maybe even let customers sneak a look at themselves after a few too many drinks. But these mirrors were old. The silver backing had started to corrode in places, leaving cloudy patches and strange distortions. Faces didn't always look right in them. Smiles stretched a little too wide. Eyes looked a little too hollow. And Daniel had spent enough nights staring into those mirrors to start noticing things he couldn't explain. At first, it was subtle. He'd be wiping down the counter, glance up and see a customer raise their glass. Except when he looked at the real person, they were sitting perfectly still. Or he'd catch a couple in the mirror laughing together, only to turn and see them silently staring into their drinks. It unsettled him, sure, but he told himself it was the lighting, the warping of the old glass, maybe even his tired eyes playing tricks. He'd been working back-to-back shifts, after all. That's what he wanted to believe. But the longer he worked there, the harder it became to explain away. One night, a woman sat at the bar, sipping a gin and tonic. She was quiet, kept to herself, scrolling through her phone. But in the mirror, Daniel swore he saw her lean over the bar, resting her chin on her hand, just watching him, staring, smiling faintly. When he turned to check, she was exactly as before, head down, eyes glued to her phone. Another night, the place was empty except for an old man in the corner. Daniel was restocking bottles when, out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone standing right behind him in the reflection. A man, broad shoulders, dark hair, close enough that Daniel swore he should have felt their breath on his neck. But when he spun around, there was no one there. He started losing track of what was real and what wasn't. And then came the night that broke him. It was late, close to closing time. The bar was nearly empty, just one man sitting a few stools down. He was middle-aged, neatly dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, the kind of customer Daniel had seen 1,000 times before. He nursed a whiskey, said little, kept to himself. Daniel was polishing a glass when he noticed it. In the mirror behind the bar, the man wasn't drinking. He wasn't even moving. His reflection was perfectly still, frozen like a photograph. Daniel frowned, glanced back at the customer. Yes, he was there, lifting his glass slowly, taking a sip. But in the mirror, nothing. The reflection stayed motionless. And then, it smiled. The man at the bar hadn't moved. His face was neutral, almost tired. But his reflection, its lips curled upward into a slow, unnatural grin, teeth bared, eyes locked directly on Daniel's. Daniel froze, heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The smile grew wider, stretching across the reflection's face until it didn't even look human anymore. The man in the bar set his drink down, oblivious, expression unchanged. But the reflection, it lifted its glass, raised it in a mocking toast. Daniel's breath caught. His hand trembled so badly he nearly dropped the glass he was cleaning. He turned his head, desperate to make sense of it, but the real man hadn't moved an inch. His hands rested flat on the counter. His whiskey glass sat untouched. Sound. Low, distorted hum. And then, the reflection did something that made Daniel's blood run cold. It waved. Slowly. Deliberately. As if it knew Daniel was watching. That was enough. Daniel stumbled back, knocking over a bottle, his heart hammering against his ribs. The customer finally glanced up at the noise, brow furrowing. "You okay?" the man asked, his voice casual, unaware. Daniel nodded quickly, muttering something about being tired, about needing coffee. He tried to keep working, but his eyes kept flicking to the mirror. The reflection was still there, still smiling, still waving, even as the real man turned away to finish his drink. Minutes dragged like hours. Daniel prayed for the man to leave, and eventually, he did, sliding a few bills across the counter, standing, and walking toward the door. The bell above it jingled as he stepped out into the night. But in the mirror he was still there. The reflection didn't move, didn't follow. It just sat there on the barstool, grinning at Daniel. Even after the door had shut, even after the man's footsteps faded away. That was the last shift Daniel ever worked at that bar. He never went back. He told his manager he was done, no explanation. And maybe you can't blame him, because to this day, Daniel swears that whenever he passes a mirror, any mirror, he sometimes catches a glimpse of that same smiling face. Waiting, watching, patient. Sound. Bar ambience fades, replaced by low static. Narrator. What do you think? Just a trick of old glass and tired eyes? Or something else entirely? Something that uses mirrors as windows into our world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if this story got under your skin, make sure you're subscribed because the next one, it only gets darker. Narrator. Our second story begins like so many college nights do, with a group of friends piling into a local bar, ready to forget about exams, deadlines, and stress. You've probably lived a night like this. The music too loud, the floor sticky with spilled beer, everyone pressed shoulder to shoulder but not caring because the energy is contagious. This was their ritual. Every Friday night, for friends, Rachel, Mia, Chris, and Tyler would meet up, order cheap drinks, and dance until the lights came on. It was their escape, their way of being young and reckless without worrying about tomorrow. And for most of the night, it was exactly that. The group laughed until their voices cracked, took selfies on the dance floor, leaned into the sticky booths to share secrets over vodka sodas. Time blurred, like it always does when music and alcohol mix. But around 2 a.m., when the lights flickered brighter and the DJ announced last call, the night took a turn. Because that's when Rachel noticed him. He wasn't dancing. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't even pretending to be part of the crowd. He just sat alone at the corner table, half in shadow, eyes fixed directly on their group. Rachel brushed it off at first. Creepy guys existed in every bar. But there was something about him that made her uneasy. He hadn't approached them, hadn't spoken, hadn't even blinked, just watched. She leaned into Mia, muttering, "Don't look now, but that guy's been staring all night." Mia peeked over her shoulder, wrinkled her nose. "Yeah, total creep. Let's just ignore him." And so they did. The bartender shouted last call. The group downed the watery remains of their drinks, and they stumbled into the cool night air, laughing as the neon sign buzzed above them. The streets were quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier after hours of noise. Their voices echoed too loudly as they joked about food, debated whether to order pizza, and teased Chris for drunkenly tripping over the curb. But then footsteps. At first, they thought nothing of it. A lot of people lived around campus, after all. But the longer they walked, the clearer it became. Someone was behind them. Rachel slowed, tilting her head just slightly. Her stomach sank. It was him, the man from the bar. He kept his distance at first, maybe 30 feet back, his pace steady. Too steady. Rachel whispered, "Guys, he's following us." The laughter died instantly. Mia looked back and grabbed Rachel's arm. "It's fine, we're in a group. Let's just keep walking." So they did. Their footsteps quickened. Their voices dropped to hushed whispers. Every time they turned a corner, they hoped he'd vanish into the night. But when they looked back, he was still there. Not rushing, not lagging, just keeping pace. Chris tried to brush it off. "He's probably just heading the same way. Don't freak out." But even his voice shook. By the time they reached the small convenience store near campus, their nerves were fraying. Tyler suggested ducking inside, maybe calling an Uber, but the girls wanted to make it home. They were less than 10 minutes away. Safety was so close they could feel it, so they pressed on. That's when things escalated. At an intersection, they split deliberately. Mia and Tyler crossed the street. Rachel and Chris went straight. It was a test. If he was really just heading home, he'd pick a direction and disappear. But he didn't. Rachel's group crossed the street, and there he was, too, matching their path. When Mia and Tyler glanced back, their eyes went wide. He'd chosen Rachel's side. There was no mistaking it now. He was following them. Sound. Footsteps echo, growing louder. By the time they reached campus, Rachel's pulse was racing. The dorms loomed in the distance like a beacon of safety, but the man was closing in. Not running, not lunging, but moving with a sickening calmness. Finally, Mia snapped. She spun around, her voice slurred from the drinks but sharp with fear. "What the hell do you want?" she shouted. For the first time all night, the man reacted. He stopped, tilted his head, and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not even a mocking one. It was a grin that stretched too wide, showing too many teeth, like he was savoring their fear. But he said nothing, not a word. He just stood there, grinning, while the group's hearts pounded in their ears. Chris yanked Rachel's arm. "Let's go. Now." They sprinted the last block, fumbling for their dorm keys, the sound of their own gasps drowning out everything else. When they finally slammed the door shut behind them, they collapsed in the lobby, adrenaline making them shake. They peeked out the window. The man was there, standing under the streetlight, staring at the building. that same grin plastered across his face. He didn't leave. Not for hours. Sound, silence, faint wind. By morning, Rachel thought maybe she'd dreamed it. Maybe the alcohol had twisted reality into something scarier than it was. But then campus security called. They'd found him. He was still outside the dorm, sitting calmly on the bench like he'd been waiting all night. When officers approached, he didn't resist. Didn't even try to run. But what they found on him made their blood run cold. Zip ties, duct tape, and a knife. He hadn't just been watching them for fun. He'd been planning. And Rachel realized the worst part. He'd been in that bar the entire night, sitting quietly, waiting, choosing. Sound. Low, ominous hum. Narrator. That group of friends could have easily become another headline. Another story whispered in warning to others. If they hadn't noticed him, if they hadn't run when they did, we might not be talking about them at all. It's easy to think the real world is safer than horror movies. But the truth? Some of the most terrifying monsters don't need claws or fangs. They just need patience. And a target. What do you think would have happened if security hadn't caught him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe, because the final story tonight might be the most chilling of all. Narrator. Our final story begins on a Wednesday night. Not exactly the kind of night people go out looking for trouble. But sometimes trouble finds you anyway. David had just finished a brutal shift at work. He was exhausted, frustrated, and honestly, a little lonely. His friends were busy. His apartment felt too quiet, so he decided to stop by a bar he didn't usually visit. Just a random spot on the edge of town, dimly lit, crowded enough that no one would notice him nursing a drink alone. He slid onto a stool, ordered a whiskey, and stared at the glass like it might give him the answers to all the things weighing on his mind. The music thumped quietly. Couples laughed at their tables. Groups of friends leaned close together, shouting over the noise. David felt invisible, and maybe that's what he wanted. But then someone noticed him. A man a few seats down, about his age, maybe a little older. Tall, well-dressed, with that kind of easy smile people either envy or distrust. He caught David's eye, lifted his glass, and said, "Rough night, huh? Next one's on me." David blinked, surprised. Strangers didn't usually go out of their way to buy him drinks. But the guy's tone was casual, friendly, just one human reaching out to another. Before David knew it, they were talking. And the guy, let's call him Eric, was charming. Effortlessly so. He had a way of making David laugh, of easing that tightness in his chest. Eric told stories about bad bosses, crazy nights, old friends. It was the kind of conversation that made the hours slip by. Before long, David wasn't just drinking, he was enjoying himself. And then Eric leaned in. "Hey, me and some friends are having a little after-party. Just down the street. You should come. No pressure, just good people, music, drinks. Beats drinking alone, right?" David hesitated. Normally, he would have said no. He wasn't the type to follow strangers to parties. But something about Eric made him feel safe, familiar. And honestly, he didn't want to go home yet. So he said yes. Sound. Night street ambience. Footsteps. Faint traffic. The walk wasn't far. A few blocks, a couple of turns, and they were standing outside a nondescript apartment building. Inside, music pulsed faintly through the walls. When the door opened, David was greeted by a handful of smiling faces. They welcomed him warmly, introduced themselves, handed him a drink. Felt casual, normal, maybe even too normal. But as the night wore on, little things started to bother him. The apartment was spotless, too spotless. No clutter, no personal items, not even pictures on the walls. The people were friendly, yes, but almost rehearsed. Their jokes felt practiced, their laughter just a beat too late. And though they all claimed to live there, none of them seemed to know where anything was. David brushed it off, telling himself he was just paranoid. He took another sip of his drink. But something about the taste made his stomach twist. Bitter, almost metallic. He set the glass down. Quietly, that's when he noticed. None of them were really drinking. They held glasses, sure, but hardly touched them. And every time David lifted his drink, Their eyes followed. His pulse quickened. He forced a smile, tried to keep the conversation going, but his instincts screamed at him to leave. Then the shift happened. The music stopped. Someone locked the door with a deliberate click. And the easy smiles around him hardened into something else. Eric leaned in close. That same grin he'd flashed at the bar now stretched wider. "Relax," he said softly. "You're among friends." But David didn't feel relaxed. He felt trapped. One of the women in the group whispered something he couldn't catch. Another reached casually for his drink, sliding it closer to him. The atmosphere, once warm and inviting, was now suffocating. Predatory. David's mind raced. Were they planning to rob him? Hurt him? Worse? His hand twitched toward the door, but he knew it was locked. He tried to play it cool, mumbling about needing the bathroom. Eric's grin didn't falter. "Down the hall, second door on the left," he said. David walked quickly, his palms sweating, heart pounding in his ears. He reached the bathroom, shut the door, and locked it. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at himself in the mirror, whispering, "What the hell am I doing here?" That's when he heard it. Muffled voices from the living room. Words that made his blood run cold. Did he finish the drink? Not yet. Give it time. Don't rush. We'll take care of it. David's hands shook. They'd spiked his drink. He was sure of it. Sound. Heavy heartbeat. Muffled whispers. He had to get out. He scanned the bathroom. Tiny window above the toilet, barely big enough to squeeze through. He climbed onto the sink, tried to push it open. Stuck. Rusted shut. Panic clawed at him. He couldn't stay in there forever. He couldn't go back out either. And then luck. He heard footsteps by the front door. The scrape of a lock. A burst of cool night air. Someone had stepped outside, probably to smoke. The door was unlocked. David didn't think. He moved. He flung the bathroom door open, heart in his throat, and walked. Fast, steady, not running yet. The group turned toward him, smiles gone, expressions flat and cold. "Going somewhere?" Eric asked. David forced a laugh. "Yeah, early shift tomorrow. Thanks for the drinks." He reached the door. His hand closed around the knob, and by some miracle it turned. Unlocked. He yanked it open, bolted into the hallway, and ran. His feet pounded the stairs, 2 at a time, until he burst into the night air. He didn't stop, didn't look back. Not until he was blocks away, bent over, gasping, shaking with terror. Sound. Silence. Faint wind. When he finally caught his breath, he called the police. They took him seriously, an attempted drugging, possible assault. Officers went to the apartment that same night. But when they got there, it was empty. No music. No drinks. No people. No trace that anyone had been living there at all. The place was spotless. Almost staged. David couldn't believe it. Hours earlier, the rooms had been full of laughter, movement, faces. Now it was nothing. The officers shrugged, told him maybe he'd had too much to drink. Maybe he'd imagined parts of it. But David knew what he heard, what he saw. And the worst part? He never saw Eric again. No mugshot, no arrest, no story in the paper. Nothing. It was like he and that group never existed. But sometimes, late at night, David swears he sees him. That same smile, watching from a crowded bar. Waiting for the right moment to offer someone else a drink. Sound. Low hum. Faint echo of a glass clink. Narrator. David was lucky. He trusted his instincts and got out before it was too late. But how many people don't? How many go missing after a night of harmless fun? Their last memory, a stranger's smile and a drink that tasted just a little off. It's easy to tell yourself you'd never fall for it, that you'd notice the red flags. But remember this, predators don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look like your new best friend. Would you have gone to that after party? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe because what's coming next? You'll want to hear it in the safety of daylight. Narrator, calm, reflective, unsettling. 3 stories, 3 different nights, Three brushes with horror that remind us. Bars aren't just places of music, laughter, and neon lights. They're crossroads, liminal spaces where strangers mix, where walls between safety and danger are thin, and where, sometimes, evil hides in plain sight. Think back to the bartender who saw too much. A job meant to be ordinary, pouring drinks, wiping counters, watching tips pile up. But one night, he witnessed something he should never have seen. In that dim corner booth, laughter covered secrets. And when the fun ended, silence carried a threat. The bar didn't just serve alcohol that night. It served as a stage for something darker. And he was forced into a role he never auditioned for, a witness to horror. Then, the friends stalked after last call. A night of dancing, spilled drinks, inside jokes, what every group of college kids expects when they go out together. But celebration turned to fear when one pair of footsteps became two. And a shadow, silent and persistent, trailed them through the streets. Bars close, lights go out, and suddenly the safety of numbers feels fragile. Because sometimes the person in the corner who never speaks isn't just lonely. They're waiting, watching, planning, and finally the wrong invitation. One man, tired and vulnerable, accepts a drink from a stranger. A kind smile, a friendly laugh, the promise of company after a long day. Who wouldn't want to believe in that? But when the party moved behind closed doors, the mask slipped. The warmth turned cold. Locks clicked. Music stopped. And the realization set in, he wasn't at a party. He was prey who barely escaped the jaws of something sinister. Pause. Sound fades to silence. Then slow heartbeat begins under narration. Narrator lower, colder. What ties these stories together isn't just fear. It's the truth that bars are traps disguised as havens. We go to them to relax, to forget, to feel alive. But the same doors that let us in also let in those who are watching. The ones who wait in the shadows for the perfect moment to slip closer. Because behind the neon glow and the laughter, there's always someone who doesn't belong. Someone whose smile is too sharp, whose eyes linger too long. Someone who doesn't come for the drinks, but for the opportunities. Sound. A faint whisper of glasses clinking, then shattering suddenly. Narrator whispering, chilling. And here's the thing about bars, you never really know who's sitting beside you. The drunk regular, the harmless flirt, the friendly stranger who insists on buying you one last round, or the predator who already knows how the night will end. Pause. Narrator reflective, final chill. So the next time you raise a glass in celebration, take one look around. At the corners of the room, at the mirror behind the bar, at the stranger who smiles just a little too wide. Because danger doesn't always burst through the door. Sometimes it's already sitting across from you. Sometimes it's waiting just outside. And sometimes, horror buys you a drink first.